the proud, the Marines.
Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great. Just like cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
Welcome. It's hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. Phone lines are open at 971-533-7111. Although we won't have much time to take live calls for this hour because I've got my presentation at the Northwest Cannabis Classic yesterday. That's right, the third in the Northwest Cannabis Classic trilogy took place last night at Pure Space in the Pearl District in Portland, Oregon. A great venue, gotta say, great venue. Mid-size, it wasn't a huge event. There was, 18, 20 vendors on the floor and a big projector area with an audience area and all that kind of stuff that I did my presentation for. But not a big, huge, like a Cannabis Cup or anything like that. I mean, it was a nice sized event. And what was surprising to me about the event was upstairs, they had an upstairs balcony kind of area that featured tasting, that featured sampling. And it's just, I guess they asked their lawyer. That's all I'm going to say about it. But it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And great presentations were had. Jeff Lowenfels was there. Tom Alexander was there as well. And some of the best cannabis concentrates, best cannabis edibles, and best cannabis flowers were judged there. The results are available at nwcannabisclassic.com. I didn't stick around for the results show, but did get a chance to interview a couple of different vendors and to do my presentation, which is entitled, It's Not About Marijuana, It's About Freedom. And it comprises some of the stuff I've talked about with respect to our civil liberties in the past, but also some specific information for the state of Oregon. And we're going to play that presentation here at the bottom of this hour, right before we go off to Stoner Jesus. And remember, Stoner Jesus comes on right here on CannabisRadio.com at the top of the hour. Before we get to that, though, I do want to bring up a couple of quick stories that I didn't have time to shoehorn into the first hour. And one of them is this story from NBC News called A Budding Industry, Asian Americans for Cannabis Education. And it starts by saying, when Tiffany Wu first entered the cannabis industry in March, she noticed that Asian Americans involved in the industry were few and far between. A trend the 28-year-old says was made even more apparent after she attended the Marijuana Business Conference and Expo, one of the nation's largest cannabis trade shows, attracting thousands of advocates and industry professionals in Las Vegas in November. Quote, I personally saw maybe less than 15 Asian Americans during my 3 days there, end quote, said Wu, a San Francisco Bay Area business attorney specializing in the cannabis industry. Now, I'm a big proponent of diversity. I'm a big proponent of making sure that we're opening up opportunities equally to people. But I also think there's this knee-jerk reaction sometimes to look at something that's overwhelmingly white and go, oh my God, there's a racist problem here. There's racism going on. Something's overwhelmingly white. Without considering the context, right? Like, if you went to the National Convention for Accordion Players, I'll betcha it's going to be overwhelmingly white, right? Does that mean that accordion players and people that like accordion music are racists? Does that mean that we're not opening opportunities for people of color to become accordionists? Or is there, and there could be some argument to that. Accordion costs money. Maybe you're in the hood. You can't afford an accordion. Maybe, right? But couldn't the overwhelming argument be that accordion is just something white people do, more likely? Similarly, if it were a convention of the national retailers of Chinese restaurants, would I be shocked if it were overwhelmingly Asian? Not that there couldn't be white folks or Mexicans or black folks running Chinese restaurants. Why not? But should we be shocked that it's overwhelmingly Asian? The NBA is overwhelmingly African American. Does that mean white kids aren't getting a chance to play basketball? There's all these situations where you look at it and no, you wouldn't stop to say, well, it's racist because it's overwhelmingly this or that. So when we look at the cannabis industry, this knee-jerk reaction to say, well, there's not enough blacks, there's not enough Asian Americans, whatever, forgets the context that Asian Americans don't use pot that much. When you look at the demographics in the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, it's about more than half of Native Americans and Pacific Islanders have tried pot. It's about 45% of white folks and about 45% of black folks have tried pot. It's about a quarter to a third of Hispanics have tried pot. And it's less than 20%. It's like, last I looked, it was like 17% or 16% of Asian Americans had tried pot. So why should we be surprised that there aren't that many Asian Americans involved in the emerging cannabis industry? Why should we be surprised? Now, the fact that there aren't a lot of black people in the cannabis industry, yeah, that's a little problematic. Blacks and whites use pot at the same rate. Why should there be much difference in the industry? But if Asian folks aren't using pot that much, we shouldn't be that shocked that we don't see a lot of Asian folks in the pot industry any more than we are not shocked to see there aren't that many Asian accordionists. All right, we're going to go off to the study here so that I have a few minutes at the end of the hour for Stoner Jesus to be able to get on the line. This is recorded yesterday at Pure Space. It is my presentation on marijuana and civil liberties to the Northwest Cannabis Classic.
I'm also the host of the Russ Belville show on CannabisRadio.com, live every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. 2 hours of news, interviews, analysis, opinion, data, a whole bunch of stuff. Great way to get caught up. The news is right at the top of the hour too, so we make it really easy for you. CannabisRadio.com, 3 o'clock every weekday. And I write for a number of websites, including marijuanapolitics.com every weekday, hightimes.com twice a week, and cannabisculture.com once a week. Also occasionally Huffington Post. So I've been covering marijuana reform, marijuana legalization for 10 years now. And one of the things that I've discovered is that our fight really isn't so much about marijuana itself as it's an extension of our fight for freedom and liberty in a larger sense. Marijuana is kind of the messenger here, and we are the soldiers in this war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs. Don't tell me we're a drug-free America. Every time I turn on my TV, I see a drug commercial of one sort or another. So today's talk is about getting our minds away from thinking of this as the right to get high or freeing the plant, and more about freeing the people, regardless of why they're using marijuana. Some people like to So when we start to think of marijuana as more a civil rights issue and more personal liberty issue, we can avoid getting ourselves pigeonholed and cornered into the opponents will say, oh, you're just trying to get high, you're just correctly high. So in this talk, we're going to take a look at this and show how marijuana legalization and the prohibition of marijuana and cannabis and hemp have all worked against our most precious liberties as Americans. We don't talk a lot about our Constitution and our liberties in our schools anymore, so we'll take some time to take a look at our liberties and how prohibition has affected almost every one of them. We also want to take a look at the foundation of prohibition. Why are we prohibiting the cannabis plant? Where did that come from? Why do we continue it? We'll wrap things up by taking a look at what's going on here in Oregon. Now that we've legalized, what is there left to do? Why are we still here? Why are we still fighting? So the first thing to understand is that prohibition is about controlling people. Marijuana is illegal because it's Schedule 1 on a controlled substance. Oh, wait, it is that? On the Controlled Substance Act. But it doesn't control the substance whatsoever. The DEA doesn't come in and point guns at marijuana plants. They point them at the people growing them, and their kids and their pets. There's nothing about the Controlled Substance Act that controls the substances. If it did, none of us would be able to get a hold of any weed. And there's plenty of that and plenty of other drugs as well. Another big portion of this fight for legalization is to understand who the architects were. And on this slide in the corner, you can see the picture of probably the most evil man that has ever been a bureaucrat in our federal government. That's Harry J. Anslinger. He was our very first drug czar before they ever called it a drug czar. This is a guy who was so against cannabis, marijuana, and the people who used it, and other drugs, that he basically, you know who the singer Billie Holiday is? The old-time singer Billie Holiday. He basically tracked Billie Holiday down and hounded her to her death, to the point where she was shackled to her deathbed on various narcotics charges because he wanted so bad to put the blacks who were using the marijuana and making people popularized. So, first of all, marijuana prohibition is a very new phenomenon. Sometimes I don't even say we're going to legalize marijuana. We're going to re-legalize marijuana. It had been legal for centuries in this country until the 1900s. We started in 1909 to get these first anti-pot laws. They're passed in El Paso, Texas, to deal with the Mexican problem. Mexicans come across the border to take our dogs. They're coming to take our dogs. And so to fight against that, they criminalized what they were using to relax, what they were using for medicine, what they were using in some cases as a sacrament. Also understand that we had alcohol prohibition. And the alcohol prohibition movement started around 1875 and of course succeeded in 1919 by passing the 18th Amendment to prohibit alcohol. That prohibition ended in 1933. Well, the problem was over that 13 years of prohibition, this entire bureaucracy had built up. These anti-alcohol guys can go after the bootleggers. And once you legalize alcohol again, all these bureaucrats are out of the car. And that's where Harry J. Anslinger comes in. He was a lead prohibitionist. And as prohibition ended, he helped to get the Federal Bureau of Narcotics put together and then became an ardent anti-drug prohibitionist. And originally, he wasn't even that concerned with marijuana. He thought being concerned with marijuana would distract from going after heroin and cocaine. But as he found there wasn't enough heroin and cocaine users to really justify the bureaucracy, that's where marijuana starts getting back in. As well as being influenced by a lot of the economic interests at the time, the one to see that marijuana was illegal. By 1937, all 48 states, because there were only 48 back then, the entire country, every state had already prohibited marijuana, and then we had a federal prohibition that takes place in 37. But here's some of the stuff they use. It's all a propaganda campaign. And this is not, crazy Fox News stuff. This is mainstream publications like Newsweek. A California man decapitated his best friend while under the spell of ready to fight and kill at any moment, right? But that's Scientific American, 1936. And then, of course, there was a lot of racism problems, like racism, xenophobia, fear of immigrants. Marijuana is highly intoxicating and constitutes an ever-recurring problem where there are Mexicans or Spanish Americans of the lower classes. And that's the New York Times from 1933. So I'm not talking fringe, backwater, little town newspaper, the New York Times. And the racism, oh my goodness. Marijuana influences Negroes to look at white people in the eye, to step on white men's shadows, and to look at a white woman twice. That's in the Hearst newspapers from 1936. And then, of course, Harry Dancing was a large part of this, building up this racist aspect to the drug war. Here's some of his quotes, and keep in mind, Anslinger was the drug czar from FDR to JFK. 1937 to 1962, 25 years, this guy set the tone of the drug war. And that's why we have so much of this still today. The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races. Marijuana is taken by musicians, and I'm not speaking about good musicians, but the jazz type. I like that, the jazz type. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana use. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and many others. Wow. Yeah, that's our drug czar for 25 years. And it's kind of interesting to note when he said that, there was 100,000 pot smokers, and today there's 28 million pot smokers. So, didn't really work, Harry. Didn't really work. So, this racism was the foundation of the drug war, and we still see its effects today. We've probably heard statistics from the ACLU that say a black person is 4 times more likely to get busted, depending on the county, it could be as high as 13 times more likely to get busted. And when you hear those kind of statistics, they're sobering and they're sad and tragic, but it doesn't put a human face on it. It doesn't really give you that gut punch feeling of what's going on and how this affects so many people in our society. So I decided to do a little experiment. You ever see those websites out there that do the mug shots? You know, mug shot website. There's one out there that's called who'sarrested.com. So I'm going through who'sarrested.com, looking at mug shots for people who got busted for drugs. I'm like, well, I want to know who got busted for marijuana, and if it was just a personal amount of marijuana, not a dealer, not any big amount, just a personal amount, not a cultivator, just a personal amount. And I finally found Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Milwaukee County, Wisconsin has a specific charge of possession of less than 25 grams of marijuana. So less than like 7/8 ounce or so, right? Personal amount of marijuana. So I collected all the mug shots from January and February of 2012 for Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Now, for the experiment, I also took a look at what are the demographics of that area. Along the top there, you can see what are the demographics for pot smokers in Wisconsin and the whole state. 83% of the pot smokers in Wisconsin are white. Not surprisingly, right? And then the rest are divided between Hispanics and African Americans. The bottom bar, though, are the residents of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. 54% of the people who live in Milwaukee County are white. 27% are African American. 19% are Hispanic. So I took all my mug shots, 2 months worth of mug shots of personal amount of marijuana, and I started separating them into piles of white mug shots, Hispanic mug shots, and black mug shots. And it's not a science, I'm guessing. There could be some Dominicans in there that I miscategorized. I don't know, I'm just taking a wild guess, right? But I thought it would still kind of give us that gut punch feeling of how racist marijuana enforcement is. So here's how it works. We're going to stack up the mug shots 10 at a time, right? So there we have 10 white mug shots. 10 white mug shots over the white Hispanic mugshots right there in the Hispanic section. And then we'll put 10 black mugshots there in the black section, right? Now, if this were being enforced fairly, each section would have a relative amount based on, there would be twice as many white mugshots as there are black and Hispanic. So I kept piling up the mugshots, but I ran into a problem. There was only one more white mugshot. 2 months, Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, 11 people got their mugshot online for marijuana possession. And there were 5 more Hispanic mugshots. 5 more, so a total of 15 Hispanics who got busted for 25 grams of marijuana possession. And then there's 10 more of the black mugshots. And there were still more black mugshots. So let's just move it over here, fellas. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 138 black mugshots. So, it's not scientific. Some people got their mugshots taken off the website maybe because they can afford a lawyer. Some people didn't. But whether it's scientific or not doesn't matter. Those people are going to go try and get a job somewhere. And that mugshot's going to be online to haunt them every time they try to go get a job. That's the racism of the war on marijuana. All right, let's take a breather here because that kind of hits you. But the war on marijuana affects all our civil liberties as well. The war on marijuana is a war against people who want to exercise sovereignty over their own mind and body. It's the government telling you how you can feel, how you can think, and what you can do. And I think it's important as we move forward with this to frame this as a civil rights act. And sometimes they get pushback on that because people say, wow, hold on. Pot smoking, that's not like the African American civil rights battle or women's rights battle or gay rights battle. And no, it's not. There are differences. But liberty is liberty. And if we're going to believe people have the right to believe things, then we should feel that globally. For example, pregnancy, abortion, women's right to choose. I keep getting told that it's my body, my choice. Well, how does that not apply to marijuana? Your uterus, your choice, my lung is my choice. My brain, my choice. So if we're going to have personal sovereignty, shouldn't it apply to marijuana? We also don't allow discrimination on ethnic background or national origin. Well, what is it about an ethnic background and national origin that distinguishes somebody? Well, you have a common creed or a common set of beliefs, or you come from the same place, or you do the same sort of traditions, or have the same language or slang. Well, how does that not apply to the cannabis community? We have our own traditions. We have 420. We have a whole holiday. We have past the Dutchie on the left-hand side. We have all sorts of traditions. Yeah. So why does that not apply to us? And then, of course, religious belief. We can't discriminate against people. And sometimes people say, Russ, people are born black or gay. They're not born pot smokers. And I say, well, yeah, but nobody's born Catholic or Mormon. They choose to be Catholic or Mormon. They may have been born into that family. But once you become an adult, it's your choice to remain in that religion. So why do we discriminate against people like us who believe a certain way about cannabis? Some of us who actually see it as a religious sacrament. So let's take a look at this. Let's get deep into this. They think they're banning a harmful plant. I think they're persecuting a harmless people. We are harmless people. And it's always funny to me when we have these people trying to ban our rights to cannabis when you know more about the founding fathers. Have you ever seen the bar tab for the Constitutional Convention? It's huge. It's $60,000. Their money. Worth of wine, cider, and ale, and whiskey. They got hammered. Our founding fathers were a whole bunch of heavy drinkers. And they lived in an agrarian economy, and some of them were hemp farmers. slavery. Here's how. Thank you. Let's take a look at the rights. Human Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments to the Constitution. We know most of these things. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. First Amendment says you have a right to religion, unless you're a Rastafarian. Sorry. Sorry, Rastas, you don't get your right to religion. Your sacrament is too popular. That's really the Supreme Court's reasoning. Their reasoning that the Native Americans can use ayahuasca and all these other hallucinogens is that, well, you can tell who they are, and there's not a whole lot of people that use ayahuasca, so they're not going to harm us for keeping that ban. But with cannabis, they go, oh, no. The minute we let people use cannabis for religious purposes, suddenly there will be 28 million religious people. Yeah, we can ban. So really, the Supreme Court has said your sacrament is too damn popular. First Amendment also says we have the freedom of speech and the press, unless you want to advertise your legal pot shop in Washington State. You get a 1,600 square inch sign white to a black lettering on it. That's your entire advertising. So much for freedom of speech. We have the right to peaceably assemble. We have the right to gather together with our friends, unless people can see us smoking pot. Why? Don't know. There's all sorts of places you can see in public where they're drinking beer. But for some reason, seeing us smoking pot, we don't get that right to peacefully assemble. And we get the right to petition our government for redress of grievances, unless you live in one of the 26 states that don't have initiatives. They can't put together a petition to try to change the law. We're lucky that way. A well-regulated militia is necessary for the security of the free state. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be abridged. Unless you're a medical marijuana patient, because according to the 1968 Gun Control Act, it is illegal for a federally licensed firearms dealer to distribute to you in any way firearms or ammunition. If you are a known abuser of stimulant substances, you have no Second Amendment rights. Third Amendment. This one's the stubborn. Nobody knows the Third Amendment. This is the one where they said the British can't put their soldiers in your house. They can't keep soldiers in your house. Well, marijuana prohibition hasn't gone that far yet. But what's the idea of not allowing soldiers in the house is to keep the eyes and ears of the state out of our private lives. There's been numerous Supreme Court cases that have given police the right to surveil us in all sorts of ways just because we're involved in marijuana. There was a case in Oregon, I forget the fellow's name, where the cops were allowed to go up onto his driveway without a warrant, place a GPS device on his car, and then sneak away, never informing this guy. And they ruled that was perfectly okay. I'm a little more worried about GPS devices than I'm worried about soldiers in my house. Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. That one gets violated all the time. Namely, in the seizure of our urine, piss test, seizure of our blood. They can search a house. There was this case where the cops had a warrant at an apartment complex for a druggie on the second floor. You go to the second floor, the warrant is for that apartment on the right. They don't notice anybody in the apartment on the right, but they can smell weed coming from the apartment on the left. And so they knocked down the door, and they went in and got the guys. They tried to, defense tried to get this thrown out by saying you didn't have a warrant, you didn't knock. You just knocked down the door. Supreme Court ruled if you can smell weed and hear, quote, furtive movements, you can break down the door for fear they're going to destroy evidence. Now I understand the destroy evidence things for a half kilo of powdered cocaine that you can flush down the toilet. But marijuana plants? Big bags of weed, we're going to flush that? We got industrial garbage disposal? I mean, that's not even reasonable. The other part of the Fourth Amendment says there should be no warrants without probable cause. Probable cause is the smell of weed is probable cause. Even if the dog says he smells weed, even if that dog is just reacting to the hammer giving a little dirt on the leash. So our Fourth Amendment rights have been abrogated. Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment is the double jeopardy amendment. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. You can't be under jeopardy of life or limb for the same crime. Problem is, they will charge you with a sales charge. Or then if they can't get that, they'll charge you with a conspiracy charge. So it's the same crime you committed, but they charge you in two different ways. So it's kind of a double jeopardy going on there. You also have the right, when they on those Law and Order shows, they say, I take the fifth. I plead the fifth. What they're saying is, I plead the right not to incriminate myself. That's the other part of the Fifth Amendment. The problem is, they need to take your urine and your blood. How is that not you incriminating yourself? That should be against the Fifth Amendment rights as well. The other part of the Fifth Amendment says we shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. Except, have you heard of this thing called asset forfeiture? Asset forfeiture, civil asset forfeiture, where the cops can take your stuff because they think your stuff committed a crime. There's literally cases in the court, like the United States of America versus $863,140. And in civil asset forfeiture, your stuff is guilty until proven innocent. You have to, and this is without you being arrested for a crime or anything. They can take your stuff. They do this all the time in the Midwest with people that even they find a roach in their ashtray, they'll seize their car, they'll seize all the cash they got on them. And you're supposed to go to court to try to fight to prove your stuff is innocent, but how do you hire the lawyer when they've taken your stuff? Like, you gotta think, gosh, how do I hire a lawyer? So most people don't. And the cops, when they use this asset forfeiture, they don't usually, it was originally written with the idea of my device time, where they go after the cocaine kingpins in their yachts, they steal their yachts. They don't go after those guys, because those guys can afford lawyers. They go after you and me, and they take just enough to make it worthwhile, but not so much that it's worth your time to fight. They usually take $1,200 to $2,400 worth of stuff, so by the time you hire a lawyer, you have all the court cases, it costs you $5,000 to get your $2,400 back, and most people don't do it. This is a $1 billion fleecing operation, billions of dollars every year that is going on in America. All right, we have the Sixth Amendment. You have the right to a speedy trial, speedy public trial. Except Roger Christie, he stayed in jail for 3 years before they scheduled a trial for this guy. 3 years doesn't sound very speedy to me. You have the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation and confronted with the witnesses against you. But how do you confront the rough dog? Rough. I don't speak dog, Your Honor. How do I confront this witness? You have the compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in your favor. You can subpoena people to testify for you, but they can't say medical marijuana in federal court. Cannot say medical, cannot say marijuana. So what good is it to have people testify for me if they can't tell the truth? Seventh Amendment, the right to sue. You have the right to sue people if they do you wrong. Unless you live in Oklahoma and want to sue your dealer for shorting your bag. You can't take them to court, it's illegal. People all over the country cannot sue their dealer, their grower, or anybody involved. Seventh Amendment also says that in any jury trial, it can't be retried once they found you not guilty. But here's how they got around that in California. There was this prosecutor in California who went after this dispensary owner. And they did it by sending a cop with a fake ID. But of course, a cop's fake ID is a real ID, you know what I'm saying? They get it from the DMV. So there's no way you can be looking at it and ever know it's a fake ID. Cop with a fake ID goes to a California doctor, gets a medical marijuana recommendation. Doctor's not doing anything wrong. He doesn't know it's a fake ID. Cop with the fake ID and recommendation goes to the dispensary, buys an aid for a quarter or whatever. And once that purchase has been made, that is what they build the case on. That this guy's doing federal drug trafficking. So, they built this case against the dispensary owner, got the fake ID, went to trial, the jury acquitted. The jury said, we're not going to convict this guy. He's a medical guy. He was doing everything above the board. He was fine. He liked what he's doing. So what they did is after this guy was acquitted, they got a different cop to get a fake ID, to go to a different doctor to get a recommendation, to go to the dispensary, to get the weed, to to set up the lie, to set up the case. But the case got moved to a different jurisdiction where she was able to get a jury that would convict the guy. Now, how is that not trying someone for the same crime twice? Well, because it wasn't the same crime, it was a different cop and a different doctor. But come on, what was this amendment written for? This amendment was written to say if a jury says someone's not guilty of something, then it's not a crime and you shouldn't bust it. All right, 8th Amendment. Excessive bail should not be required. My bail for marijuana residue was $1,200, and I have friends whose bails were like $500,000 for marijuana plants. The federal bail is $500,000, $250,000 for marijuana plants. That's kind of excessive. Excessive fines shouldn't be imposed. Again, federal fine for one marijuana plant is $250,000. And then most people know the 8th Amendment from no cruel and unusual punishment. Right? No cruel and unusual punishment. Except when you imprison a medical marijuana patient and then you deny them their medicine and then they die in a jail cell. Richard Floyd, Jonathan Maggie, if I thought real hard, I could come up with 3 more names. Too many people die losing this medicine. That's cruel and unusual punishment. And now my favorite amendment. My favorite amendment is kind of a sleeper. It's a dark horse. Most people don't think about the 9th Amendment. They'll think 2nd Amendment, guns, 10th Amendment, states' rights. But the 9th Amendment, I think, is the best one. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. I like to think of this as the we couldn't write them all down amendment. When the founders were writing down what our rights were, they could have written down a lot of stuff. You have the right to take a walk. You have the right to enjoy a sunset. You have the right to kiss your wife. You have the right to be there. You could write down a ton of rights if you really thought about it. And the 9th Amendment was their way of saying, look, just because we wrote some stuff in the Constitution, that doesn't mean that's all your rights. I believe that what the 9th Amendment says is that we have the right to farm cannabis. How could these guys who were hemp farmers not have thought it was a natural right to farm hemp? How could they have not thought that? I mean, it would be as silly to them to write down, you have the right to farm crops, as it would be for us to write down, you have the right to be there. It's just so self-evident to them. They never would have thought right then. And so I think this amendment says we have that right, that natural right. And then the 10th Amendment is the States' Rights Amendment that everyone knows, states' rights. And in the Constitution, and nowhere in the Constitution will they delegate the power to regulate medicine to the federal government. And they do not prohibit the states from regulating medicine. So under a strict reading of the 10th Amendment, medical marijuana is a states' rights issue. So, that's your Bill of Rights. And there's a few other amendments in effect, just real quickly. The 13th Amendment says that's the amendment where we emancipated the slaves. There shall be no slavery or involuntary servitude. But nowadays, we arrest people for small amounts of marijuana. We put them into a jail or a prison where they work for the Corrections Corporation of America for 19 cents an hour, booking trips for Greyhound, making panties for Victoria's Secret. I mean, so many corporations are tied up with this prison labor thing. It's almost, well, it's an involuntary service. The 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Amendment, says if I go from state to state, I should be protected the same in every state. That doesn't apply to medical marijuana patients. They can't even go to all the same medical marijuana states. Only Arizona, Delaware, Maine, Michigan, Montana, and Nevada recognize any state's medical marijuana card. That's 6 states out of the 23. A medical marijuana patient with a card in Oregon, their card's no good in Washington or California, and vice versa with the other 2 states. 15th Amendment. 15th Amendment was the amendment that said you can't deny people's right to vote because they were slaves or because of the color of their skin or whatever. You can't deny their right to vote. However, this is how they get around that. In most states, when you're a felon and you're in prison, you cannot vote. There's 2 states where you can. Vermont and Maine, you can be on death row and they'll bring you a ballot. You can fill out your ballot. You never lose your right to vote. In a lot of those states, though, once you're out of prison, you get your right to vote back. But in some others, you don't get it back until you finish probation. And some others you don't get until you finish parole. And in a few states, mostly the southern states, you don't get your right to vote back. If you commit a felony, you either lose it for a period of 5 to 7 years, something like that, or in some cases, you never get your right to vote back. One of those states is Florida. Now in Florida, 3/4 of an ounce, 21 grams, is a felony. Anybody caught with an ounce of weed gets a felony, loses their right to vote for life. Now, who gets busted for? Black people. So what happened in Florida is because of felony disenfranchisement, because people in Florida who lose their right to vote very rarely if ever get it back. 1 out of 5 voting eligible African Americans in Florida cannot vote. 1 out of 5 cannot vote. Now, remember the 2000 election, Bush v. Gore, when George W. Bush won Florida by 537 votes? If all the people who've been busted for an ounce of weed hadn't lost their right to vote, since they are more likely to have been black people that got busted, and black people, 90% vote Democratic, there would have never been a President George W. Bush if marijuana wasn't a felony in Florida. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice to agree with that? 16th Amendment, or Income Tax Amendment. Well, they're using that to attack the dispensaries. They're using IRS 280E code to go after dispensaries. So that's another way they're infringing on our rights. 19th Amendment is the women's right to vote. 19th Amendment. From 1980 to 2010, the number of women in prison has increased more than 6-fold. And again, when you're in prison in most states, you don't get to vote. So it affects the women's right to vote. And the 21st Amendment, that's the one that repealed the prohibition, right? The original alcohol prohibition. In the 21st Amendment, it actually recognizes the word intoxication. So in our Constitution, it recognizes we have a right to alter ourselves. How is it not equal protection to allow alcohol, but then ban marijuana? We can be proud of being a legalizer because this is a civil rights fight. It's hard to think of anything that affects 16 out of 27 of the amendments. Sometimes I'll debate these prohibitionists and I'll say, well, why don't you guys support prohibiting alcohol? They'll say, well, alcohol's different. There's a culture with alcohol. Alcohol's been in our history for years. And I always say, well, what about our culture? We've had hemp in America since 1611. We've had medical marijuana since 1850. We've had hashish bars reported on in the New York Times since 1853. We've got popular musicians like Louis Armstrong, Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Dinah Washington, Billie Holiday, that sung openly about marijuana and using it. So we've had a culture in this country for almost 100 years for recreational, 200 years for medical, and 400 years for hemp. How much more culture do we need to get this legal? And of course, this is one of the few issues that skips to all sides of the political spectrum. To Democrats, this is a civil rights, racial justice, labor sort of issue. On the right, with Republicans, you can say it's states' rights, individualism, small government, liberalism, personal choice, environmentalism, or religious freedom and patriotism. There's a reason for everyone to support legalization. All right, final part to wrap it up. Now what do we do in Oregon? We got marijuana legalization in Oregon. So now we all have our rights and we can all go home and just enjoy smoking weed. Well, no. There's a whole lot we still have yet to address. Employment rights. We're all subject to our employers using urine testing or hair testing or saliva testing to get a job or keep a job. They're not doing that to alcohol drinkers. You can get all messed up on alcohol, you're not going to lose your job unless you come to work drunk. Custody disputes. Family courts can still use your status as a cannabis consumer as a negative influence on your right to child custody, to adoption, to parenting, visitation. Our medical rights. We can still be denied organ transplants and other medical procedures. Now they fixed that for medical marijuana patients. Medical marijuana patients can't be kicked off the organ transplant list. Well, why should the adult use consumer be kicked off the organ transplant list for their marijuana use? with my house from Oregon to Washington. That's interstate drug trafficking. You can't do that. That's illegal. It's also illegal under Oregon law for exporting to another state. Freedom of speech. We still have those ad restrictions going on in Washington State. You only have this little tiny sign. And probably the one that's in the news lately, that we've all been affected by, is our right to assembly. Now this is beautiful, right? We all get to be here and enjoying each other's company and tasting our all that. But there are at least 3 clubs in Portland that I know of that are so-called cannabis cafes or vapor lounges, if you will. And they've been all volunteer, BYOB, bring your own buds. So they don't even serve marijuana there, you have to bring your own, right? And now in the Pacific Northwest, we don't have any place to smoke other than our house. And to me, there was you remember back, nobody was alive then, so history. After the Civil War, we had the 15th Amendment, gave everyone the right to vote, whether you were a slave or whatever, you can now vote. So the way that the Southerners got around that was with Jim Crow laws, where they have a poll tax or a literacy test, or some way to make it so it was impossible for black people to exercise their right to vote. That's what I think these no public use things are for us. We've got a right to use marijuana and possess it, but if you live in Section 8 housing, you can't smoke in your house. Some landlords can ban your use if you're renting. So unless you own a house, you don't have the right to smoke pot anywhere. We need to have vapor lounges. We need to have cannabis cafes. And Washington has felonized these things. It's a felony to have a cannabis cafe or a club. Oregon has passed this as part of their Clean Air Act by adding vaporization and cannabinoids to the Clean Air language. But that's BS, because the Clean Air language was all about secondhand tobacco smoke. And there are scientifically shown harms from secondhand tobacco smoke. You can't show that from secondhand cannabis vapor. But they just tacked it onto the law, and by January 1st, this is going to make all the cannabis cafes and vapor lounges illegal. But if you run a cigar bar that holds less than 40 people and has adequate ventilation, y'all can smoke cigars in there all day long. If you're a smoke shop that has less than 4 chairs or seats for people and want to allow people to sample tobacco in your smoke shop, that's okay too, so long as you have adequate ventilation. But God forbid you vaporize any cannabis. Well, that's wrong, people. We've got to work to get that changed. We'll wrap up with some math here. We passed Measure 91 with 56% of the vote, and it said if you were going to ban marijuana businesses, you had to have a vote of the people. But the legislature said if your county voted more than 55% against Measure 91, you don't have to follow the statewide vote. You can just ban. So, those counties in red up there are the counties that have banned all marijuana businesses, and there's no vote. It just is. Nobody gets to vote. The yellow counties are the ones that ban marijuana businesses, but at least there's going to be a vote. In those counties, that makes up 52% of the land mass of Oregon. So in more than half of Oregon, marijuana businesses are banned. Add to that, cities, 45 Oregon cities have passed bans on marijuana commerce. The ones in red, no vote. Those bans are just bans. The ones in black, there will be a vote. If you add up all the people in the cities and the counties, 23% of Oregon's residents live somewhere where marijuana commerce is banned. Put it another way, 1 out of 4 Oregonians lives in over half the state where marijuana business is banned. Now, we do have adult use pot shops where we can get our cannabis, some of these dispensaries that are allowing sales. This is a map of every single dispensary that's selling to all adults. You might notice something about it. Kind of tilted heavy to one side, right? In fact, 92% of the dispensaries selling to adults are within 65-mile crow flies of I-5. That strip of I-5 from the coast to the Cascade Range, 92% of your dispensaries are in that range. The only places east of the Cascades are dispensaries in the vows, 1, mattress, 3, and then 12, 14, so 22 total, whatever it is. You know what this means? Look over to the right side. You see where Boy Scout is over there? And if you get to the Oregon border, that's where Ontario, Oregon is. You know where Ontario, Oregon is? I'm from Boise originally, and Idaho's laws are really strict. So whenever we wanted to go buy a pot pipe, we had to drive to Ontario. There were no head shops in Boise. We had to drive to Ontario. So it's very dear to me. You know, kind of one of those things when you're coming up, that was kind of a good memory going to Ontario for a pot pipe. If you live in Ontario, Oregon, the closest pot shop to you is not in Oregon. The closest pot shop to you is up there in Clarkston, Washington. It's closer for an Ontario resident to drive to Clarkston for legal pot than to drive to Bend, the Dalles, or Memphis. So we still have a lot of work to do, folks. It's not just about marijuana, it's about freedom. I'll have this PowerPoint. If anyone wants to copy it, I'll be glad to email it to you. Check out my show on cannabisradio.com, 3 o'clock every weekday. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Russ Belville! Don't forget to catch him on Cannabis.
Good time there at the Northwest Cannabis Classic, presenting to a very full room, as you could probably hear. But I hope the content was good for you. Join us tomorrow for another great show here on CannabisRadio.com. We'll have more news and interviews for you to use in the cannabis community. Coming up next, Stoner Jesus, right here on CannabisRadio.com. For everyone here at Rolla J Studios and at CannabisRadio.com, thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Welcome back, everyone. 13 and a half after the hour. And today in Behind the Headlines, the headline we're reading says, Aaron Hernandez chain-smoked marijuana, never failed NFL drug test. This is coming to us from Yahoo Sports. Of course, Aaron Hernandez is the former tight end for the New England Patriots who's on trial for murder. He's accused of killing a semi-pro football player named Odin Lloyd in June of 2013. And as the trial has been progressing, some of the testimony has been quite amazing. On Wednesday, there was a revelation that Hernandez chain smoked marijuana sometimes up to an ounce a day. So the interesting part of this, of course, is that Aaron Hernandez never failed an NFL drug test. This goes back to a Boston Globe story from 2013. And it's not as if the NFL doesn't test for marijuana. They catch plenty of players who smoke marijuana. Just ask Josh Gordon, one of the leading wide receivers in the league, who was given a 1-year suspension for turning up positive for marijuana metabolites. There have been many other players who have been caught and suspended as well. Why wasn't Aaron Hernandez ever caught? One could speculate, as he was playing for the New England Patriots, and there does seem to be kind of a shadow of shenanigans that follows the Patriots wherever they go. Whether it's deflated footballs or spying on the other team, who knows what Bill Belichick's got up his sleeve when it comes to protecting his players from the dreaded whiz quiz. Don't know, just speculating at this point. But also consider all of the ways it is possible to beat a drug test. This is the thing that's most frustrating to me, in this whole issue of drug testing for marijuana, whether it be in sports, in school, or at the workplace, and that's the fact that it doesn't work. Drug testing for marijuana clearly didn't catch Aaron Hernandez. Here's somebody we could have wished would have been booted out of the NFL for smoking pot, given what he's seems to be guilty of now. Whereas a guy like Josh Gordon just seems to like to smoke a lot, but doesn't seem to cause any problems off the field. Be nice if we were catching the right guys, but the point is there's no point in trying to catch these guys in the first place because their use of marijuana off the field, away from the fans, away from the cameras, on their own time, should be as allowed, as respected as their use of alcohol off the field. And we know how much the NFL supports the use of alcohol through the advertising of the Budweiser and the Coors Light and all of the drinks that you see on every game day, Sunday, Saturday, Thursday, Monday night, plenty of alcohol sponsorship. Now, when it comes to this drug testing, it's just never going to catch the people it's intended to catch. And part of this is because there are so many ways of beating a drug test. For example, I know a woman who beats a drug test, and she works in an industry that's quite strict on drug testing. And she beats the drug test because she has a friend who doesn't smoke pot, and that friend will give her some clean urine, which she can then put into a condom, which she can then store in her vagina as she goes